Hi everyone, welcome to our last session for today, Regional Waste Management. I went in the wrong room before, so lucky I checked the door. So given it's our last session, we'll try and stay on time because I know everyone wants to go out for a drink later. And depending on how we're going, we might save questions for the end of the session. Okay. So our first presenter today is Guada Lado from Armidale Regional Council. She's the Manager of Regional Waste, and she's presenting small cash-strapped regional councils. So I'm looking forward to hearing about this one because I think we can all relate to that. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm glad we got this room because the lectern is a bit lower and you can see me and I can see you. So small cash-strapped regional councils, it's not a term that I've come up with myself, and I think many of you here are familiar with that term. But who cares about small cash-strapped regional councils apart from all the regional councils in the room? I think actually more people should care about small cash-strapped regional councils. The fact is that more than half, so 55% of councils in Australia are considered regional, rural or remote, and collectively we manage a lot of assets and a lot of land area. So in New South Wales, that figure is 72%. So from the 128 councils, a large majority are actually regional, rural or remote, even though it only represents 38% of the population of New South Wales. That in itself causes some challenges. Collectively, we manage about 98% of the total land area of New South Wales. So there's our New South Wales councils. There's supposed to be 128, so if you can tell me which one's missing, I wasn't able to work out which one is missing. There's only 127 on there. Anyway, the point of that slide is just to show the majority are indeed small cash-strapped regional councils. Armidale Regional Council is where I'm from, and my examples will be from Armidale Regional Council, which is part of the Northern Inland Regional Waste Group. And it's just up the hill from Coffs, so if you've got nothing planned for Friday after the conference, feel free to come and visit. So we cover over 8,500 square kilometres. That's about 3/4 the size of Greater Sydney, with a council population of, only about 29,000. That's where we are. Some directions, so again, come and visit Armidale. Let me know if you're there on Friday. Come and live in Armidale. We've got uni, schools, nature, waterfalls, hospitals, Kmart, Aldi, Bunnings. That's my little plug for Armidale. And so if you're looking for a tree change, as I did, I've moved from Sydney just over a year ago. And yeah, it's a beautiful place to live. But I understand if you can't come and live in Armidale, but you can still invest in Armidale. So jokes aside, so what are the challenges that we face in waste management? So when I moved to the council, coming from the Sydney context where we think of councils as rates, roads and rubbish, I was quite surprised to learn that, waste wasn't the most important thing in the council, and for us it's like, no, this is the most important thing. But as it turns out, council also provide water, they do sewer, and, in the past few years, a few years ago, there was a major drought, so water was the biggest issue. Council runs an airport. Council runs as with some other councils, childcare centres, but They also run the aged care. There's cows up there. Council has cows. I was like, okay, this is different. So those are some of the challenges, just the competing priorities of a regional council, and everything is important, and everything that the community wants or community needs that's not really profitable or viable for a private business to come in and do, the community want the council to do. For example, the local cinema was closing down and people wanted the council to run the cinema. So the community expectations are really high. As a university town, there's a transient population. We've got a low income base, a low rate base. As I mentioned, only about 13,000 households. We've got distances and we're isolated, and it's rural, low density. So those are just some of the high level challenges. But there are some opportunities. So again, I'm not selling you an Armidale at the moment, but there's some opportunities there, which is why you should come to Armidale. Okay, so space. So we have 8,600 kilometres of land area. We've got the region's newest landfill. This is the most, as I understand, this landfill was approved in 2012, and it's the latest landfill, brand new landfill to be approved, not including landfill extensions or expansions. And this was constructed in 2019, 12 k's to town, and this is cell 1 of our landfill, and you can see it's brand new. You can still see the white, the liner on the landfill cell, and we're filling that fairly quickly. So another opportunity that we have is we do in-house landfill management, and so we were able to conduct some trials with some landfill lids, using them in place of daily cover. That's saved us about, on average, 1.5 hours a day in operational time, 100 cubic metres a week in airspace, just based on the size of the plates and 150 mils of daily cover, and the transport of the daily cover material in the airspace that fills up. That's been really successful, and we expect to get the return on investment in 2 to 3 years. Another opportunity is in procurement. So this year we rolled out our new contracts for recycling collection as one contract, and garbage and FOGO collection as another contract. So overnight, once in the implementation of the new contracts, we were able to implement new technology, standardise some routes, and clean up a lot of data. That part didn't happen overnight. There were some challenges we had to address as an amalgamated council. We used the opportunity to streamline our service collections, and for example, we had FOGO and recycling from the same property collected on different days in some of our areas due to the amalgamation. So the new contract allowed us to streamline that and have one collection day for everybody, and we had to change over 2,000 collection days. So that came with its challenges, but now a few months in, things are settling down, and we've addressed some of those data gaps. We're leveraging some technology like route optimization software. I think if you attended some of the previous sessions, you would have heard about that in the technology stream. Contamination management, stolen bins and other things. Another opportunity that regional councils have, as you would know, are assets. So this is a user map for our main transfer station in town. It has, we have a CRC at this site. In fact, we have two in our council area. This is one of two landfills. This is our older landfill where we take asbestos and we keep it open in case of emergencies. But we also have 6 rural transfer stations. So compared to, metropolitan context where that council may not even have a CRC, this is actually a real opportunity that we have as regional councils. So that site is another 5.25 hectares. On that site, we do in-house FOGO processing. In Armidale, they've been doing this for about 14 years. So when I came, I was like, wow, that's really amazing. That's really excellent. And it was just, I accepted that this is what we do, but it's a low-cost, scalable method. As you can see in the slide there, this is where it happens on the old landfill cell. You need a concrete pad. We use a loader. We have a shredder. You need some tarp, and you can have beneficial reuse of your tyres. It's pretty basic. It's aerated static pile composting, and we use an inoculant that's totally organic. We make it in-house. It's cheap, and we would recommend this to anyone. And so come and speak to us if you're interested in, with the move to FOGO collection and processing for all councils. We really believe that this is a solution for regional councils. You can start small and you can scale it. In the last 2 years, we've increased tonnage by about 27%, and we haven't even started on the education yet to get the remaining component out of the red bin. Another opportunity is sales. So we have resource recovery sales. We control our gate fees. So we not only, process the compost, but we sell it back to the community. Similarly for mulch, we sell crushed concrete. That's a revenue stream for the council. Partnerships is another opportunity. So working in partnership with the contractors. So as you're all aware, there's new guidelines for what we can take in our FOGO. The council used to promote and use dirty pizza boxes because we could compost those things. But that's changed. So being able to work with local contractors. Although the other one is partnership with other sections of council, so partnering with our water department, for example, with our free mulch giveaway with a water reduction message. Partnership with households. So we have crate recycling. We provide 2 crates to households. We do separated paper cardboard in one with a lid and the other containers in the other one. And we provide this as a weekly collection service. We allow unlimited crates, so that resolves any constraints on the capacity. And we have really high recycling rates, and I think this is another really good solution for regional councils. We process over 3,000 tonnes of recycling, and only 50 to 80 tonnes of that goes to landfill as contamination. We have an end-to-end view of some of these processes. So this is within our main waste management facility in town. Council owns the site. The equipment is owned by a recycling contractor. As you can see, there's the stats are recycling creates more jobs, 9 versus, we have 17 local jobs here versus the 2 at our landfill. we have a high recycling rate, as I mentioned, but it's still only about 41% of the domestic waste stream, even with everything that we're doing. So there's another opportunity. The community expectations. So we were, interestingly to me, when our tip shop was closed down, we closed it down at the end of last year for various reasons. On our first day back at work, there was a protest forming at the former location, and the mayor had to provide a statement, and I just went, wow, like all this for a tip shop. But, we brought this service in-house, and we don't have good data yet on the diversion rates, but what I can tell you is we're operating only for 4 hours a day on weekends, and it's bringing in generally about $1,000 per weekend, based on sales of items that are $1, $2. I think the most expensive thing we sold was $40, or actually a portaloo for $100. I think that was the most expensive thing. But that's a lot of movement. And another opportunity is remote management. So this site, Ebor, is 80 k's from town, and in the last couple of years, this has been automated. So residents in the local area, defined catchment area, were provided with a key code, and it's gated, it's monitored, and we don't need to staff it, and we can get live monitoring of the site, alleviating, the issue with travelling the distances. And one final opportunity, a really major opportunity that we have, is the renewable energy zone. So this is where we do have volumes of solar panels which have very low recycling rates at the moment, but in this region, there'll be about 1.5 million solar panels, or when I converted it, it's about 27,000 tonnes, or 2 years' worth of our landfill disposal. Not to mention the solar batteries, the batteries that go with that, the wind turbines that currently don't have a recycling solution, and now, turning some of our challenges into opportunities. We have a university, there's an EPA, and there's it would be great to foster conversations around this, banning the solar panels from landfill or temporarily storing them until solutions come into play. At the moment, that's where they go. And it's not just end of life that you have to worry about, because once these are commissioned, you end up with a number of solar panels damaged in transit and in the process. So you have those. There's also a lot of the timber waste, the pallets that these things come on, and all the other associated waste. The renewable energy zone definitely opens opportunities for our area and for the local councils, and for the local economy. So just to summarise some of that, again, most of these challenges, such as the university, working with the university, become opportunities. So we have regional landfill tours with the local university students, and we're looking at partnerships for research and things like that. Again, our renewable energy zone, a lot of opportunities there. If you're in that space, please come and talk to us. The airport, I'm sure there's an opportunity there. We'll work on that one. But basically, and sorry, one of the other challenges I didn't mention was we also have a massive Kempsey Road project, which is the largest local government project in the order of about $500 million or so. But I believe that, a lot of these challenges, probably with the exception of the cinema, running the cinema, can become opportunities for waste management. we don't have a lot of multi-unit dwellings yet in our region. We've got the opportunity, we've got a recent local strategic planning statement. We've got the opportunity to get in front of some of this development. We don't have curbside collections, and we don't necessarily have that culture of putting things out on the curb waiting for it to magically disappear. People are accustomed to bringing it to their local sites. So I think these are all opportunities that we can leverage and not get too disheartened about being small cash-strapped regional councils. So that's me, my contact details if you have any questions. There's an updated photo of Zeke. Some of you may be familiar with the old one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Might have an influx of new residents after that. I'm sure many of us can relate to those issues being managers of regional council areas. So our next presenter is Giles Perryman. He's the Director of Ask Waste Management. And Giles is going to be presenting on the perfect rural transfer station, fact or fiction. I need stronger magnifying glass.
Just move this one up a little bit. There we go. Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Well done. You've nearly made it to the end of the first day. Congratulations. In terms of posing this question, I guess to give a bit of background to myself and Ask Waste Management as to how we feel qualified to talk about this. We've been going over 15 years now. We've got offices in New South Wales and WA. Our specialism is rural, regional, remote. So we've been to many, many rural transfer stations. We pride ourselves on providing solutions to our customers, which is why the little orange marks up there are CUI. A lot of our customers would be saying, oh, look, you really need to collect some good data at your facilities. And they said, well, there's nothing really out there that's cost effective for us. So we bit the bullet several years ago and thought, well, how hard can this be? It is quite tricky, it turns out. Oh, sure. There we go. So therefore, yes, we developed CUI, which we're at 35 facilities now, and I'll mention a little bit about CUI later on. And at this point, I should probably apologise. I produced this presentation over a weekend, so I wasn't possibly in the most professional state of mind. And some people may get the reference, it was done on May the 4th. So, the perfect rural transfer station, where the sun always shines, the public are always polite, so are the staff. Nobody ever tries to hide some asbestos under a load of green waste. Good data is collected, you maximise resource recovery, and during the day, the unicorns fly in the background and the pigs disappear over the horizon. I'm being a bit silly, but, is this actually achievable? I'll get a little bit more serious now and just skim through the considerations, which I'll go into a little bit more detail during the presentation. So we've got access and control, who's going to get in and who isn't. Staffing or not, depending on the size of the facility. Objectives to consider in terms of a transfer station, probably number one, it's got to be safe for the staff and the customers. Maximising resource recovery is pretty key to all of our strategies these days. And we want efficient operations, including the transportation of waste. That's where there's potentially real gains to be made in moving the waste and the materials to recycling centres or to the landfills. It needs to be resilient. If something's going to go wrong, it will. And you need plan B in place so that the facility can continue to operate. And a reuse shop, yes or no. Personally, I'm a fan of them, but that's a whole separate presentation, but certainly something to consider. But to take a step back, where should it be in the first place? Typically, if a new one's going in, it's because a small old landfill is getting closed. But that site where the landfill's been, especially if it's a smaller rural site, is there a power supply there? Is there water? Is there a mobile signal? Is it close to the actual main population centre? Often the old landfills 5-10 k's out of town, out of sight, out of mind. A modern transfer station doesn't need to be so far away, it can just be on the edge of town. Would it be better to bring it closer? Most of the materials that are leaving the site, if they're leaving site or town to the east, would it be able to stick the transfer station over that side so the trucks aren't driving through town all day? These are sort of things to consider. So just if you're at that stage, taking that step back and just not doing the knee-jerk response of, oh, we're closing the landfill, stick the transfer station there. And then once you've decided where it's going to go, then we're back to the list of actually what it needs to be. So access, oversight and control, size dependent. You know, there are transfer stations servicing 50 people, transfer stations servicing 50,000. Staffing is always the better option. It just gives you that whole extra level of control, oversight and better outcomes. But they don't need to be open 7 days a week. It needs to be open appropriate to when the customers are using it, and that's where you come back to needing good data. As we heard earlier, was it Guada? With a very small transfer station, at least if you've got a remote access, that gives you some level of control, stopping some of the illegal dumping. And if something dodgy does happen out on site, hopefully you've got the CCTV footage to see who was responsible. In terms of the design, you want to be controlling entry and exit, broadly, gatehouse with a boom gate, and minimising contamination. You don't have to be manually sorting out your scrap metal if somebody puts the wrong stuff in the wrong place. And that general oversight, certainly if it's a smaller site with a single member of staff, you want a line of sight from the gatehouse. Unfortunately, most of our general public, once they're no longer within line of sight, some of them tend to just, we'll just drop this here rather than put it where they should be. And if it is an old landfill, contain the transfer station. Don't allow people just to continue to roam the entire site, having a look around to see what they want to see. Staffing or not to staff, it's pretty much the economics. Here I've sort of, in these photographs, a few examples of what can go wrong at unstaffed facilities. You know, scrap metal bins full, so people have just chucked it in front, but the reality is the hook lift truck can't back up to this now. So you're going to have to get a crew out with a bobcat to sort that out before you can do anything. Big long weekend, bins overflowing, and with no staffing, people dropping off any materials that they want to, including hazardous materials. And then when there's no staffing, that's just there for other people to roam around and investigate themselves. So if you're unstaffed, you've got all these extra costs. You've got to reactively clean the site up. You've also got gate fee avoidance. It's amazing the lengths and the distances people will drive to drop waste off for free. And that is apparent at many unstaffed facilities. As I mentioned, dropping off hazardous wastes. We've analysed numerous sites around rural Australia. This is a snapshot of the broad breakdown of the costing. When a site's staffed, the actual overall costs are only about 10-20%. Most of it's with the disposal of the waste, which you can't really do much about. You've got that tonnage coming in, or the transport. So while it might seem like a big ticket item, it's not. Oh, the screen's just gone blank. We'll go with the other one. Sorry, I missed a bit off there. Are we going to go back? Yeah. So yes, when we did that analysis, it was generally the staffing, it's not an additional cost, and it brings you all the benefits and bonuses that allows you. You want to maximise resource recovery, which is predominantly a good site layout. You want to make it easy for your customers to put the right stuff in the right places. So that's key in the initial design. Pricing, we've heard, stuff that's free for people to drop off, the recyclable materials, that will encourage them to do it the correct way. Signage, when we're used to the facilities, we in our head think that there's a logical flow and everything makes sense, but if you only go there once every couple of years, good signage is actually important with that clear layout. And if you've got staffing, then you can provide that guidance and oversight and a little bit of education. We're putting this stuff in these separate containers for this reason, and this is where it's going to go to afterwards. Also, there's an opportunity for a sort of second pick. If you've got a design and a setup, for example, in the top photograph there with the old school hook lift bin, once that material's gone in that bin, it's there till the bin gets tipped. So if somebody puts contamination in the recycling bins or put something that could be recycled in the general waste bin, that's it, it's going to stay there. Whereas if you've got a flat floor system and you've got enough staff on site or they've got enough time, it gives us an opportunity just to do a second sort, which will improve your contamination rates and the materials that you're recycling. Economics. I've sort of touched on this a little bit already. Should small rural sites be standalone break-even? Bit of a sort of philosophical question. Waste is such a economies of scale business, and with the smaller sites trying to achieve reasonable economies of scale, it is very hard. So you have to accept that possibly the smaller satellite sites will be cross-subsidised from what's coming in at your main sites. But what can you control? Well, the staffing, as I mentioned, the appropriate opening times. Once you've got good data, you can see, well, when should we be open? At the weekends, should we actually have some extra staff to cope with the customers? Disposal, waste acceptance controls, making sure that the site is being used by your residents. If you don't accept commercial waste at those sites, having a tip voucher or a pass system in place to avoid that being abused, and limiting it so that once people have cleared out the shed 3 or 4 times in 1 year, it's a small business if they're still rocking up with waste, and they should be paying for the commercial gate fees. And the transport, I mentioned this earlier, doing it efficiently. We looked at this in detail for a number of people. Hook lift bins, we've aggregated data. So this is already averaged monthly data. So it's the averages of 10 bins at least. And we found variability in aggregating it, or sort of, extrapolating it to a 30 cubic metre bin, only 1.7 tonnes of waste as an average across a month, leading to a heady nearly 4 tonnes of waste, which kind of shows it's a fairly inefficient way of moving stuff around. But for the different facilities, it's a different tipping point. In some situations, that is still the most efficient way of doing it, with ways of improving things through protocols. And if you've got a bit of plant on site that you can do some sort of manual compaction, that's great. You can go down the route of a compacting unit into a sealed hook lift, then you get 3 or 4 times more waste in. But it's just a maths exercise at the tipping point. What tonnage are you collecting? How far are you transporting it? Do the transport savings offset the capex and the opex of having a compactor on site? And then data. I've already mentioned CUI before, gratuitous plug coming up. We've developed this gatehouse operating system. It provides really good data, and it provides that interpreted data back to managers quickly and efficiently. We've built a system. I mean, my company, we're a bunch of wasters, and we know what happens at the site. We know what the managers need back in the office, so we've had to learn the tech to make that happen. So we can say exactly when the customers are coming and what each customer's brought in. What are the materials that are being received? All allowing you to make these decisions, informed decisions about running the facility. What vouchers are being used and when and by which customers? And the gate fees being charged for any C&I, if you accept that, and C&D at the facility. And as we heard a moment ago, sometimes these sites are a long way away from HQ and their manager. So, with an electronic operational checklist that can be done daily or weekly, it provides that regular communication from the facility back to the manager. They can have a look and see, okay, we've got a damaged fence, we've got people dropping waste at the front of the gate when the site's not open, just to keep that communication going and the corrective actions taking place. And then I mentioned resilience, plan B. Yeah, worse things happen at sea, but also in rural transfer stations. If you've got a bit of specialist kit, where is the nearest mechanic with the spare part to fix that bit of kit? In some situations, you can't get round it. But, I've been to sites where the landfill compactor's been down for months on end because the part and the engineer to fit that part just isn't available. So if possible, you want to try to be using plant and equipment that's readily available, that is hopefully used by your local government in other areas as well. So if a bit falls over, you can easily keep going. If you have got the specialist stuff, you need plan B, so that if you have got a waste compacting unit and it goes down, the facility is configured in a way that you can continue operating, albeit less efficiently, but you can continue to provide the service until that bit of kit's put right. Unplanned staff changes. Someone phones in sick, small council, it could be Fred on admin, suddenly finds himself doing a shift out at the gatehouse at the waste facility. So it comes back to, again, you're wanting simple systems that they can pick up and understand easily, a clear layout of the site, as important for the staff as for your customers, and an operational management plan so that if something unusual does happen, they've actually got something to read to check it all out. And now we're on to is the site safe for staff and customers? Waste facilities, including transfer stations, can be pretty dangerous places. And we need to be designing out the trips and the fall hazards rather than retrofitting. In the couple of photographs there, we got one, the top photograph is really quite scary. They got as far as putting up the bollards, but nothing in between them, with a probably 2-3 metre fall off the concrete edge. The second one's your old school hook lift. When we were there, basically the normal issue had happened. They'd put up the barrier to stop people falling in, so they just backed the ute up to the edge so they were a metre higher as they were chucking the old rubbish in. So then they put out the traffic cones to try and stop that. But it's a retrofit, and if you've at that stage where you're designing a new site, get it right at the beginning and avoid these hazards. Issues with customers. It shouldn't happen, but customers can really be quite rude to your staff at times, and aggressively so. So a system in place that allows your staff to have recorded what happened and who it was, so that you can be collecting that information, and if you have repeat offenders, you've got the data there to be able to write to that repeat offender and tell them to sort themselves out, or they're not going to be allowed out to the site anymore. And staff facilities. We still go to sites. They may only be open for half a day at a time, but there's no toilet for the staff, which is a bit of a stretch in this day and age. And if it's a single member of staff at a facility, obviously safety check-ins during the day to make sure that it's not them that's ended up in a hook lift bin stuck with a busted shoulder. So help is on the way. So finally, fact or fiction. I personally believe with the right planning and thought, you can achieve the perfect rural transfer station. If you're setting up a new one from scratch, you're in a great position. Do your homework, sketch them out umpteen times. It's much easier to look at different scenarios on a piece of paper than before you build it. Do your homework, see what new innovative functional solutions are out there. Don't just copy the one that's down the road that was built in the 90s. If you've got an existing facility, get good data, analyse that data, look to see what improvements you can make, then beg your managers for the budget to actually put them in place. So that's pretty much me done. Hopefully you've had some insights there on how you can improve things at a rural transfer station. Unfortunately, I can't help you with the flying pigs, and look out for the unicorns because you never know when they're going to pop up. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Giles. That was awesome. We're building a couple of transfer stations, so I've ticked a lot of boxes. It's really good. Okay, our next presenter is Kylie Jacky. Gonna make me, this one's not working, so I'm gonna have to, yep, thank you. Nope. Sorry, Kylie, I don't know where you're from, because they've changed the screen.
Environment Protection Authority.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Kylie's presenting on embedding Aboriginal knowledges and cultures in the EPA. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Just while we're starting, so thank you for the invitation to come and have a yarn to you, a very brief yarn this afternoon. So Kylie Jacky, Lead for Aboriginal Initiatives in the New South Wales Environment Protection Authority. I'm a Nyangba woman from the Bundjalung Nation. I belong to the community of Cabotstry Island, which is located in the Richmond River, Lower Richmond River, just 2 hours north of here, south of Ballina. It's my father's country. We have deep traditional roots to Nyangba country. See if this works. But before I start, I'm a visitor to Gumbaynggirr Jagun. So in our protocol, I I'd be asking country and old people to bless my visit here today. So Nali Nana, Gumengia Jagun, Gunu Janda, Mandi Nothing Gara, Guriaban, being Nubugan. So that's acknowledging country, or we say Jagun traditionally. And thank you to the old people, those that have left and those that are still with us today. So I'm not going to give you a waste presentation. I'm going to step you to the side a little bit and give you a bit of a peek into the EPA's journey, which is still quite new, around the exciting and dynamic work that we're doing around realising the opportunities, around building relationships with Aboriginal peoples, how Aboriginal cultures and knowledges and the values that have been held in deep time by all of our over 50 Aboriginal sovereign nations in New South Wales have protected and kept country through our custodian responsibilities. And that really strong alignment to the mission and objective of the New South Wales Environment Protection Authority as the primary regulator to protect the environment. So about 3 years ago, there were some really clever people in the EPA that said, let's give it a go and let's establish a team to help us along with this journey. Be quite honest, I had the opportunity to come and help establish this team and lead the program of work in partnership with the New South Wales EPA board and executive, but more importantly, the staff. At that particular point, realising the program of work and what we're achieving was actually quite not really well known. There are a few things that we wanted to do with the primary objective that we wanted to build the cultural capability of the organisation. We wanted to strongly message and have aware to all of the EPA the importance, but we had to come back to fundamental questions of why. So, sorry, this is a photo of my team at the moment. There's a few more missing. But so the fundamental question of why, and maybe many of you from local councils or business and industry, maybe councils a bit more, but business and industry, why do we need to regard or include Aboriginal cultural knowledges and values? So hopefully this kind of either provokes or triggers you to look back and have another think about the approaches. So I've got a few examples that may inspire or provoke or have you questioning, but it's been a bit of a dynamic journey so far. One of the first things that we wanted to do was to really make it quite visible and clear that we have an Aboriginal Initiatives team, but more so that we're building our cultural capability. That beautiful artwork there, you may have seen it in the foyer, and it's domed across many of our assets in the EPA. We've been gifted this by Gerard Black, who's in that photo. He's a Warramai man. And he's not only gifted us this beautiful Aboriginal visual identity for our branding in the New South Wales EPA, but he's also gifted us language and his cultural interpretation of this particular artwork. Nare Gulbare Yawatang Wari, which is loosely translated to Spirited Country, Our Journey Now. And that was his cultural interpretation off of the back of a whole range of yarning sessions that we undertook in 2021. We were still in lockdown at that time, working remotely with about 300 staff over about 18 yarning sessions for NAIDOC Week. We got the EPA together and it was a bit of a big splash to come and have a yarn about what working with Aboriginal people, understanding values and country means to them. So I've got a little insight into that for you. Kylie Jacky, lead Aboriginal Initiatives, and I'm coming to you today from Yangbook Country, which is a part of the Bundjalung Nation in northern New South Wales. I'd first like to pay my respect and acknowledge all of the Aboriginal nations of New South Wales, its people, custodians, first protectors of our country. I hope you enjoyed the NAIDOC Week yarning sessions for 2021, and here's a bit of a snapshot of what we've pulled together to remind you of the great work that we've done together to contribute to build an Aboriginal identity for the EPA.
We talk about country as Aboriginal people, we talk about country as a being, and I think a good thing to think for us is you hear when people like to say this is my country, and it's not like it's no one else's. This is the country I'm connected to, this is the being I'm connected to.
Healing and caring for country is really aligned with what the EPA should be doing, and what sort of our reason for being is all about. But I think this also is about recognising that there were peoples in this country, and their connection to the country is something we need to be mindful of.
The big things, I think, for me is recognising my ancestry has been probably a big part of the problem, if you will. I'd really love to be part of the solution moving forward, and a big thing for me is learning.
My initial things that came to mind was regenerating what we've lost, and in saying that, I suppose regenerating our connection to country, connection to people.
The first thing we have to do is to start to listen, and then start to learn and respect Aboriginal and traditional knowledge and practices as something that we can really use in our work in protecting and preserving the environment.
Our country is our soul, is our mother, and I mean, if that's gone, we're gone too.
Heal to me means, for people like me who are not Indigenous, just a much greater understanding of Aboriginal history, Aboriginal law, Aboriginal society. I think it's incumbent on us to understand that, because what is coming out is clearly what we were taught in school was not exactly full facts. So to me that's what heal means.
It actually encompasses all aspects of how the environment needs to be protected from everyone's perspective.
Healing country is like NAIDOC weeks. It's really special to have time with you guys, and we're so busy and there's so much stuff in our faces on phones and emails. It's always good just to take time out and think about what it actually means. And it's great to see everyone's backgrounds, and it means a lot for our people just a bit. And for me, healing country is just respect, just respecting the lands and the people and everyone here is all a part of it. I guess from a Torres Strait Islander point of view, we're seafaring people, and through trade, we have to look after our waters. We have to look after, and there's about 270 islands there, and they all produce different food and different shelter material and different materials.
We care for the environment not only because of our job, but because we enjoy actually being in that environment ourselves. So Darren mentioned about the rivers, and we go kayaking on the lakes and go camping in the wilderness and that sort of thing, and we see what a beautiful country it is, and you feel that connection about caring for it, and that transfers into the job as well.
Healing country, it's about, country for us is not a physical thing, it's also a community thing, and I think we've all been through a lot over the last year or so with COVID, and we've had people affected, and it's just great to be able to start that healing process.
To me, a lot of it's about the way it all connects up, and that you can't we're not just about the environment, it's about the environment which connects to the people, which connects to the social, economic values. If you can't just look at one. If you look at one, you're actually making yourself part of the problem. So if you want to be part of the solution, you've got to understand how all those things interact, and you can't have one without the other working well. So it's just taking that holistic view is pretty important to me.
We need to better incorporate Aboriginal values and perspectives into that, and so listening to Aboriginal communities about their values and what they want would be a big part of that.
We're all on a journey, hey, but thank you for sharing, being vulnerable, because we're all learning.
So that was one of the first kind of foundational blocks built to really get the whole EPA involved around this exciting dynamic journey around bringing Aboriginal people, our cultures and our knowledges into the EPA. Those yarning sessions informed a brief to Gerard Black, the Warramai artist, and then he interpreted that through his cultural lens, which gave us Naregu, Bare Yawatang Wari. And you might see some of that design around the conference. We're still doing a lot of foundational building, to be honest. It's kind of not a linear process. It's always an evolving one. But the next couple of examples that I want to give you are quite exciting because they're about embedding and making sure that there's surety around the work that we're doing in the EPA and starting to think a little bit more broadly and deeply about how we influence, enshrine and support this work in our regulatory role. One of these is our statement of commitment to Aboriginal peoples. In 2022, the New South Wales EPA joined with a number of Aboriginal persons who are renowned cultural knowledge holders, but also quite highly esteemed academics as well. So both holding the Western science academia reputations, but quite connected to their cultures and their places of belonging. And we were working with that group around bringing in Aboriginal voices and perspectives into the State of Environment report, and we did that for the first time in 2021. That was quite an exciting period, and we've got ambitions to continue that work and lift the bar. But one of the conditions that that group said on their end of their tenure with the EPA was that you fellas got to be fair dinkum and make it known to the New South Wales Aboriginal peoples around your continued work to look at country not only from your regulatory lens, but from the lens of Aboriginal people as well. That's a gap in your knowledge that you need to fill. So I'm really proud. We have a statement of commitment. It's available on our website. What you'll find is that it is symbolic in its nature, but has 12 quite concrete principles that is easily actionable. And it talks to things like weighing up Western knowledge with Aboriginal cultural knowledges and how we have capacity to bring that in. It is not a contest. Both of them are essential to understanding how we see and look, and therefore how we care and manage and restore country. Check it out. It's been quite a game changer for the EPA strategy and the work that we do, and definitely helpful in promoting this with Aboriginal people and communities, because EPA doesn't have a huge profile across the state. Quite daunting as well, because the commitment's pretty fair dinkum, so something to live up to. But the way we live up to it is just to hold up our accountability. And one of the things that we've done more recently, but I've been beavering and working on in the last 18 months, is the EPA has stood up an Aboriginal people's knowledge group as lessons and opportunities of what we learnt from those individual Aboriginal persons that helped us out with the 2021 State of Environment report. We don't want to lose that rich, challenging at times conversation. And we actually did acknowledge that whilst we've got some pretty deadly, meaning really good, scientists, policymakers, strategists, programmers, industry-based people with great expertise in waste and forestry and water quality, what we don't have is the traditional knowledge of country and knowing what country looked like prior to colonisation. I'm really proud to say that in February this year, we established an Aboriginal People's Knowledge Group, months of work before that, and they held their inaugural meeting. The Aboriginal People's Knowledge Group is an advisory committee of the EPA. It is an independent body though, and we will work with them to give them that space to speak truthfully, because their their remit or their mission is to advise, guide, nurture, but challenge the EPA in the work that we're doing and to uphold the statement of commitment. And these wonderful cultural knowledge holders up on the screen here, I won't go through them, but they all represent collectively saltwater, freshwater, rainforests and desert country. And that's very important to Aboriginal people, that we have representatives speaking for all those countries. And they're a pretty reputable group, quite intimidating in a good way. So we're really excited. We think we know we're one of the first independent EPAs in Australia to have an Aboriginal Advisory Committee. We've been talking to the New Zealand EPA with their Māori team, equivalent to ours, and they have a Māori Aboriginal Advisory Committee. So we think we're heading in the right direction. I might not have time, I'm not sure. But here's a little look at the inaugural meeting and some ceremony in starting that meeting in February.
Wurama Gangil, the wind of change. In the wind, Wuramaga, the ancestors' voices are carried through time.
Today's marked a significant step in the journey and history of the New South Wales EPA. With the ceremony, we're now stepping into the inaugural meeting of the Aboriginal People's Knowledge Group.
We talk here about giving country a voice, but it's also about listening to country and not listening with your ears, it's actually listening with your whole being. And we know that country is unwell.
I often get told that I can speak for country because, when something happens and somebody needs to step up and say something, they'll say, Sue will do it. That's become a very important part to us and we want to keep that alive.
So the main reason why I came and started to do this was to make sure that when it comes to the hunter, that we actually start to look at what's actually happening there. People without housing, plus, the water side of things up there, and how they're actually going to be able to do things properly.
Every single unit across the EPA has touched base with the Aboriginal Initiatives team with a real desire to learn and improve the way we go about incorporating Aboriginal cultural values and also with those relationships with Aboriginal people. So the work that's underway at the moment around the 2024 State of Environment Report, we're going to lift the bar.
We're very grateful to have this ceremony and to have all of you who have agreed to serve on the Aboriginal People's Knowledge Panel. It's the first of its kind in Australia. It's long past time to give voices to country, to the cultural values of country, to how we think about our work healing country. But today is one small step towards that healing to help state government integrate the knowledge and wisdom of Aboriginal people.
We're in this flux of change as beings, we're changing all the time. How we was yesterday, we're not today, and we're influenced by so much. So let's all come together as one Wakulda and influence that change.
So thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of a sidestep around our journey in the EPA.
Thank you, Kylie, that was great. I know it's something that's been incorporated pretty much into a lot of our decision making in council too, so it's good to see a change. So our final presenter for today is, I brought my thing up because I'm not going to rely on technology anymore, Jonathan Beckett from Talis Consultants. He's the waste team lead for New South Wales. And the presentation is assessing the feasibility of a regional circular economy centre of excellence. So can I get Jonathan up?
Alrighty.
Last presentation on the first day, so we'll try and keep this upbeat. But any questions, please feel free to sort of ask at the end. All right, so I'm making a presentation today that really is on behalf of a much larger project group, of which I was only one member. Oh, gone blank. I'd like to sort of acknowledge those wet engineers involved, GIS team involved, our waste teams involved, and some of our design team involved as well. Now, essentially, what the project is for the Mid-North Coast Joint Organisation of Council. It included 5 councils from Port Macquarie down or up to Coffs Harbour, with Bellingen, Kempsey in between, as well as Nambucca. It had a very large working group attached to it that included not only the councils and representatives from the council, some of those were waste managers, some of those were directors, even a general manager from one of those councils as well. Sustainability managers were involved, but also New South Wales EPA and 2 government organisations, Regional Development Australia and the Department of New South Wales Regional Development as well. Essentially what it was a project to try and see how, or first of all, what potentially could be a centre of excellence. What does that mean? What could it aspire to? What could it end up as being? And actually, how could it be developed and delivered? Now, we had to start the project from a platform to move forward in a direction, but we recognised that we actually had to have a project method that was adaptive, responsive. We needed to work closely with the client. We needed to have a number of stages where we could bring findings and outcomes to the working group for discussion, for their feedback, validation, and to help cement and develop the way forward into the next stage of the project. So it was a very fluid project. It was a project that sort of relied very heavily on a close cooperation and a narrative between ourselves and the working group. And I think that the outcomes that we're sort of able to derive and the recommendations we're able to make actually sort of are very reflective, not of just us, but of the working group involved as well. This presentation essentially has got 2 parts. It's a short summary of the process or the project itself, which took about 9 months. I'll keep this quite high level, but anybody who's wanting to know much more information or detailed information behind the scenes, very happy to talk to you about that later. The second part, though, is what we can take away from that experience, from that journey, to those who might be interested in doing something similar, slightly different, but what did we learn? What can you take away to sort of benefit yourselves? The obvious aim with the project was really to sort of look at how we can extract value from waste. So it's very much a waste-centric project, Centre of Excellence, focused on waste. It was a single site, if you like, single premise site-based Centre of Excellence we actually looked at. It was actually a Centre of Excellence that was owned and governed by local government itself and delivering all the services itself on land it owned. But again, along the way, we found some outcomes, which we'll share with you later, which actually might be an adaptation to that in the future. One of the first things we did was to actually sort of look at the 9 R's of circularity and where, in fact, we could be working within the circularity. What we should try and concentrate on with a Centre of Excellence. You'll see in later slides as I sort of go through the stages, one of the first things we did after we collected all the data was to actually have a visioning workshop and to actually say, well, we found this, we think this, it looks like we might be heading in such and such a way, in such and such a framework. What do you think about this? What's your feedback? But from the outset, it looked like as if we'd sort of be working in that middle group there from about R4 down to around R7, possibly including R8 and R9 at the lower end as well, which is sort of targeted more around the more traditional sort of MRF and ORF processing, and leaving out R0, 1 to 2, which are probably activities that need to be done more by policy at a higher level. That set the scene for the activities that we ended up developing as we went down the track. Here's a summary of the stages we went through. So first of all, we had to understand the opportunity that's presented by waste. Broadly speaking, with that 5 council region, those councils control around about 240,000 tonne a year of waste, of which approximately 50% or 120,000 tonne is actually landfilled. 75% is actually controlled by two councils, which is actually quite unsurprising. The councils to the north and the south, the larger ones. So they, if you like, contribution, their waste streams, their initiatives is actually very important, and also their sites in this particular project. We include a combination of all data, not only just self-haul, but also collected at the curb as well. The fate of that waste once it's collected, where processing occurs, and movements of waste out of the region. Again, looking at the opportunity for more circular initiatives within the region, if we could do anything about that. We cast the net wide. We wanted to look at what was private industry doing as well. What waste were they collecting that wasn't actually being taken to local government sites, and how could we sort of account for that? We looked at various initiatives, circular initiatives that are already well away and underfoot within that region, between the north and the south councils within the project region. Because one of the things that we didn't want to do is put any disruptors in place. So if we looked at what initiatives possibly could be, how we might set up the Centre of Excellence, trying not to disrupt existing initiatives, but rather to support them where possible, to take on the new initiatives as required. We also took into account various product stewardship, extended producer responsibility schemes that were already underway, because there was actually no sense in trying again to do something in that space if a scheme was already developed, was mandated, was well and truly on the way to be delivered. So we try and sort of cast the net wide in the waste space, bring it in consideration of existing activities and dropouts to end up with what we defined as the opportunity. What could we do with that waste? Once we sort of defined that and actually broken it down, we had the first of which we call the visioning workshop. Now, this is a large workshop, about 25 members, as I said, included the government departments and the EPA as well, with divided opinions. Now, that's a very important outcome in itself, because this group have probably got together for the first time. And what we really were trying to do during the workshop is saying, your data is suggesting this, but how could we actually work with you to develop a concept to deliver improvements on your particular landfill diversion, and what actually part of that waste stream that is being landfilled really to you presents the opportunity for doing something further. Unsurprisingly, it comes down to sorting mixed waste and trying to do something more with deconstructing problem waste. Again, went backwards and forwards about that. Different councils had different, if you like, opinions about how much they wanted to get involved in processing themselves or not themselves, and how much they actually believe that was possible. They were all acutely aware of the consumption of landfill void space, which is one of the greatest resources a council can own, in addition to the sites themselves, and actually what could they do going forward to protect that resource. The third thing we did was, when we got the feedback, is we actually said, right, let's have a bit of a look at what potentially could be the sites in the project region to actually establish a site-based centre of excellence. So we're still working towards what this could be, but where could it actually happen? We gave the member councils an opportunity to provide up to 2 sites within their own LGAs for consideration. And then up to a number of 15 sites, which we would look at in detail. We actually, our GIS team, surveyed thousands of potential sites at a high level to sort of build up another 7, so that we had 15 sites in total. We could do a more detailed multi-criteria analysis. So we cast the net wide again. Let's see what's out there, what potentially could be out there. How do we actually select those sites? And there's another slide coming up that shows a little bit more about that. Once we'd actually selected the site, we actually had to sort of develop a site concept plan. Now, the reason why that became very important is we had to understand what infrastructure would be required, over what size, and the cost of building and delivering that infrastructure and operating that infrastructure. Again, we'll see some subsequent slides how we broke that down as well. Within the multi-criteria analysis then for the site selection, we had a number of factors here that were actually involved, and we weighted those factors. Now, we've summarised those factors there, but they all had objective criteria supplied to them, so that they had to meet certain distances, yes, no, certain elevations, certain proximities. And we actually weeded out, if you like, from the GIS work, and then going through the criteria, those sites that actually didn't meet a minimum standard. So we graded them. We'd accept a 3, if you like, tier response. And we actually graded them down. And of all the sites we looked at, the one that came out as the most suitable is that owned by Port Macquarie at the Cairncross Waste Management Centre. So for all the sites we looked at the region, that's all the sites owned by the member councils, all other sites we considered, that came down as the most opportune site to develop a centre of excellence. Here was the final concept plan, which had a lot of involvement from the members of the working group, and basically what it was what could be on that site, what activities could be undertaken, and what would they look like. Basically what we have in the top corner, you can see what we ended up calling primary processing, so it's where the MRF and some organics, food and garden organics processing would be carried out. In the middle there, I haven't got a pointer on this, but in the middle there was what we call secondary processing, so it's where some of the residuals, perhaps from the MRF and from deconstruction of problem waste, could actually be used, microfactories, to produce a saleable material. And at the front we had what we ended up calling community-facing initiatives. So this is where all the softer elements of the site, the knowledge centres, the learning centres, the education centres, possibly sustainability, reuse, repair cafes and so forth and so could be actually located within the site. Now what transpired as we were sort of worked through this is a number of key criteria that sort of fed into what we could actually do on the site. One of them was a large percentage of the 5 member councils actually had regional contracting obligations that were arising in 26-27 with expected 10-year delivery for collection and processing. Now, it was highly unlikely, we considered, that a centre of excellence could be developed, agreed upon, built and delivered in order to be ready for that contract period. So they actually had to go about doing their business to actually look at that contracting period while this was running in parallel. Nonetheless, we retained the concept that in fact you would still possibly include the primary processing of organics and a MRF, but in the future, perhaps it wouldn't necessarily be FOGO processing as we see it here. It might be more of an energy to waste derivative. And we made space there in the concept plan that if that was the case, after the contract period that's about to start, so ending in about 2036, that actually could be accommodated in the future. Okay, then we moved on to the last piece of work before we did the feasibility assessment, and it was all around project governance. So we've got the site, but it's all around who owns the site, who manages the site, and who delivers the site services. We looked through a number of models. There actually, as I say, we had to do our initial modelling on all owned by local government, but actually could local government independently form a company? Could private industry be involved? Could there be some sort of public-private collaboration? We looked through the pros and cons of all those models. We got feedback from the working group. What did they think? What did they feel? Risk, management of risk, always a key of interest to local government, and that was more about trying to say no, or we'd be prepared to sort of look at owning the sites going forward, but major infrastructure not necessarily. We're more interested in DBEAT, or design, build, own, operate and transfer back to local government at some point in time. But we had to start at a starting position and price it out from a CapEx and OpEx point of view that it would all be a local government owned, and then work backwards, if you like, sharing off options so that we could actually come back to a model that might be more attractive. At the end of the day, the feasibility assessment, we had to, we did all, I guess it was 3 parts. It was financial, it was risk related to markets, particularly markets which were in what we ended up calling secondary processing, so it's the deconstruction, it's all the doing something with materials that are from waste separation as well. The risk associated with those markets, their survival, their fluidity in terms of prices received, how reliable they were, would they still be here in a year's time? And then lastly, probably just as importantly as we realised as we worked through this, was the political risk. Really were the member councils in a position to be unified, to actually stand with and behind each other to develop a site such as this? And were they ready to go forward in one hit and develop a site such as this? The CapEx of a site like that, based on those tonnages of waste that I was talking about, was at just over $100 million that we priced. Now that's starting at a greenfield site, that's building all the infrastructure required to process the waste streams on that particular site. It had an OpEx of around about $10 million across the whole site. It ended up actually through the analysis actually being more expensive at a relatively high level than what was already being paid for by those member councils at the moment. So from a financial perspective, at that high level, that was not attractive. But what we did is we actually were able to work through with our working group, through our recommendations, actually come up with some recommendations that they could take away now, they could use now, and perhaps councils such as your own or individuals such as yourselves might be interested in the lessons learned from the steps we took and what could actually be done. So the considerations, the first and foremost is we believe it's site selection. It's got to be site selection. Site selection will actually dictate what can be done on that site, and in the end, whose LGA it's in and whose that site actually has a very strong bearing on who or what the governance structure will be on that site. They're the two, if you like, biggest outcomes to come first. The second thing which we really found was we needed a phased approach to transition. The first phase was actually individual or member councils actually doing more of what they're doing on their own sites with their own budgets through a more circular lens, but a greater sense of coordination, of integration of shared knowledge, experiences, and hopefully costs, and, if you like, working together perhaps more with the local waste, the voluntary waste management group. The second phase, which could be developed in parallel to the first phase, was more around how do we build a circular platform? So how do we get this political unity, this political will together? Where does the budgeting look like? And how can we actually grow the successes that we found within the first phase? So start with the first phase of doing more with what you got, a very much organic approach. The second phase is what can you actually do? How could that actually be delivered and who would be in it? So governance structure is a very important part of being determined and assessed within the second phase. In fact, what we found and believed is the way forward is that delivering a centre of excellence is actually a third and final stage. It's an infrastructure heavy phase, it's a site-specific phase, but it can't be jumped into straight away. There is, if you like, there needs to be much greater analysis, consideration of who's involved and what they're bringing to the table. Because of the time limits here, I'm going to move through this quite quickly. The phase one activities, you can see are summarised on the screen there. As I say, it's more at a lower level, doing more with what you have, and it's actually trying to sort of build experience in certain activities that potentially could be taken to a centre of excellence and using economies of size and scale expanded upon. Leaving behind initiatives such as concrete crushing, concrete brick tile, which a lot of the councils actually weren't doing to their full potential, soils, and those other bulk materials, was definitely left there as a phase one activity, not to be brought into a phase three because of the cost of road transport. Phase three activities, now we're talking about the actual centre of excellence itself, were much more embedded in, well, what can we do with that problem waste, deconstruction of problem waste, and doing more with that microfactory concept, deconstructing, for argument's sake, PV cells, solar cells, which are a rising problem universally across regional Australia now, how to manage those, what to do with them. Clothes, textiles, plastics, silage wraps and plastics and so forth as well. What could actually be done with those? How developed, if you like, is regional processing, and are they ready, are the markets locally ready to actually be off-takes for those particular materials? So those phase three activities are much more infrastructure heavy, much more technology heavy, and we deem those to be, if you like, from a succession point of view, to be developed after the phase one and phase two, which is building that circular platform. So basically in the phase three, which is a circular hub itself, so this is the premise on the site, we saw that the best way to go here is actually to develop what we call the resource recovery hub. Now that's the flat, if you like, civil infrastructure on which anything and everything from that point forward can be delivered. So it includes all the stormwater and the leachate controls. It includes the hard standing, the weighbridges, the roads, the power, all the utilities and communications. In fact, what you're providing is an opportunity to deconstruct waste, process waste, transform waste. Now, one of the greatest competitive advantages that local government has is its land assets, especially its waste facility assets. And you look at that in comparison to private industry who struggle to establish assets similar, it provides the perfect base, if you like, for that sort of partnership that we're talking about, where we might split local government and commercial infrastructure actually on a resource recovery hub. We were proposing, therefore, that the resource recovery hub would be built and developed by local government by that local government whose site within their LGA. The primary processing in the end was the processing of the curbside collections and the organics. At this stage, we were talking about FOGO processing through something like tunnels, potentially energy from waste in the future. Very much in the past, that's been a service provided by private industry. Going back to the group, after we did all the financials and the feasibility assessment, that actually became that was too expensive for them to own and operate, and it's much better to retain, if you like, the deboot model, which was much more common in existence already. However, as we move to the right there across there, we're looking at secondary processing. Now, this is all where we're actually trying to, looking at sorting mixed waste, or the outputs from mixed waste sorting, and the deconstruction of problem waste and perhaps some residuals from the primary processing as well. Here you're starting to move into slightly riskier territory. If you try and outsource all the risk on private industry, we know there's issues with prices going upwards, and we know that there can be issues with actually finding sites to do it on. So potentially that presents itself as a JV sort of a model. Share the risk, have an open book assessment. We were proposing that the resource recovery hub would actually be split up into lease blocks that actually be leased back to the individual waste processors who are taking occupancy of those sites, and under separate commercial processing agreements, there may be open book in there, but it's a risk sharing. By the time we got to the third group, which we call the community-facing initiatives, these, if you like, is the cement between the bricks. This is all the softer stuff, as I was talking about, the knowledge centres, the information centres, the community, if you like, facilities that they can bring forward concepts, develop them, explore them. The funding opportunities in administration, the cafes, the tool lending libraries and the like. It's everything that brings all the softer components of a hub together. What we recommended going forward, and I'll wrap this up very quickly, is that a lot of our investigations actually relied upon something that's known as the whole of life cost of landfilling. Now, this isn't a concept that's either well known, and it's not a concept that's well documented, and even worse, it's not a concept that actually the base costs that should feed into that are actually even recorded by most local governments. So essentially it is what is the cost of consuming landfill void space in terms of what would it cost you in today's dollars to replace it? Now, depending on the value you used, and we use a number of values in there based on data we'd been actually given, that has a huge bearing on the actual assessed financial sustainability of a centre of excellence, the diversion of waste from landfill. We were working on around about a 25,000 tonne diversion from landfill from that 120,000 tonne I was originally talking about. That was actually sort of going through those processes related to microfactories and actually building outputs on deconstructed materials. The second one, which had a big bearing, unsurprisingly, is the dollar value you put on the primary processing output. So this is really what is, at this stage, the output value of X MRF, X FOGO. And how does that vary? Who controls those markets? We used a figure of around about $80 a tonne for the value of commodities, X MRF, but did quite a bit of an investigation of how that varies and how tremendously that varies even year to year. Another one was actually the type of road transport vehicles used. Again, keeping this very short, we did some analysis where we looked at waste transfer stations using bulk road transport vehicles as opposed to, over a 20-year period, using existing curbside vehicles travelling longer distances, so therefore you'd need more of them. And not surprisingly, having the larger vehicles with the waste transfer stations was substantially cheaper, need to be investigated where they could be built. We didn't include, but projects such as this should consider greenhouse gas inputs. So what's the inputs of moving waste around regional networks? And what is the dollar value on that? And possibly in the end, also in this particular project, is actually how many sites could you actually have? Does it make sense to have one on the north and the south? Would it make more sense to have one in the middle? The trouble with, in this case, having one in the middle is that all the waste is to the north and the south. If it's all then actually ending up in Sydney from the MRF perspective, if all the compost is going out waste from the FOGO perspective, their location actually depends on where the markets are currently, but where they potentially could be in the future. Finally, if you like some other considerations, look at the existing contractual arrangements. Where are councils locked in onto their collection and processing, and who's actually doing it for them? How best can waste streams be brought together? Through transfer stations, through single sites, through multiple sites? What's the role of waste to energy? Well, the emerging thought is the role of waste to energy is, if you like, as an anchor tenant. So it's actually trying to provide energy for a centre of excellence, however it's deemed and applied. In this particular case, that was a future consideration. It wasn't built into this particular project because of the existing contract base. How can logistics costs be minimised? We had a little bit of a talk at that. Is it only one hub or more? What's the target? As I said, the target as we saw it is mixed waste and the problems associated with problem waste. How will it be financed? Who finances and who's doing it? We need to know the takeaway message, some questions. What is a circular economy centre of excellence? What does it actually mean to you? In this particular case, working with the group, it actually meant working right from the base oil processing, the primary processing upwards, right up through into what we call community-facing initiatives, which are the softer initiatives, including data and financing and community education there as well. It wasn't just infrastructure related, certainly based on those. What elements should it include? What is happening in your region? We talked very briefly about competitive advantage, but very much so. What are the, if you like, the idiosyncrasies, the special features of the region, the waste streams, potentially the region, local manufacturing in the region, and how does that sort of offer potential? All right, so the key takeaways is that it should, we believe, be a process of transition through a number of phases. Where are you on the phase now? We should actually consider further investigations, as we mentioned on the site. Some of those things that aren't necessarily included in considerations as this, but long-term going forward very much should be relating to transport, wear and tear on major road infrastructure, carbon emissions and so forth, and understanding the funding programs and financial opportunities along the way. But really sort of getting deep into some of those issues relating to whole of life costs and how much does that really determine the financial success of this. Better leave it at that.
I'm not sure that we have much time for questions. I think we've got to wrap it up at about 5 o'clock, but all our presenters hopefully will be around after this session, and you might be able to catch them up in drinks later on at the welcome reception. So I think that's out the front in the outdoor exhibition area, and I guess that concludes everything for today. So give our presenters another warm hand. And